Hi there, students. So, what's the difference between sorrow and misery? Miserable and sorrowful? Well, firstly, I think the most important thing is that sorrow is only the result of mental pain. Something that makes you sad in your head causes sorrow. But if you've got a pain, if you've got a bad back, oh, my back hurts, that is not going to make your life sorrowful. It's not going to make you sorrowful. That is going to make you miserable. So miserable can refer to physical pain and to mental pain, whereas sorrow only refers to mental pain. Now, I also feel that misery is something that is ongoing. It's something that lasts. It's a sad and difficult or painful situation. And the reason for this situation is the Latin meaning, and in Spanish and French, misery talks about living in poverty, living in very bad, low conditions. And you can use misery for this in English as well, although it's not a very common use. Misery, extreme poverty. Les Misérables, a book by Victor Hugo, is talking about the poor, unfortunate wretches of the city. So misery is a state of poverty. And therefore I think misery is something that is more ongoing. I think sorrow can be ongoing as well, but sorrow is something that has made you sad. Sorrow is a feeling of great sadness, whereas misery is unhappiness, is something that continues. So 10 years of marriage have made her life a misery. She feels miserable because it's unpleasant. Whereas sorrow, it's talking more about, you feel sorrow about somebody's death. The sorrow he felt at the death of his father was too much to bear. There was a great deal of sorrow for the victims of the explosion. The war caused a great deal of misery. Misery is long-term suffering. So he wanted the misery to end. He wanted the sorrow to end as well. Let's try something. There was a look of misery on his face. Yeah, a look of sorrow on his face. Same thing, interchangeable. The traffic and commuting to work makes his life a misery. Sorrow doesn't work here. This is not an emotional pain. It's misery is talking about being uncomfortable. The greatest misery in my life was my divorce. The greatest sorrow in my life was my divorce. I think they both fit. I think sorrow is probably better though. And after that, my life was miserable. So this problem causes untold hardship and misery to millions of families. Problems. This is going towards poverty. Yeah, sorrow wouldn't fit here. Okay, so human suffering, pain and misery, pain and sorrow, same thing. Both words would work. So misery, a state of suffering that's the result of need or poverty or affliction. And that is misery, not sorrow. Whereas a circumstance that causes emotional distress is something that makes you very unhappy. That is a sorrow. You make somebody's life a misery, you don't make it a sorrow. Sorrow talks about an unhappy, unpleasant state. It was my great sorrow that I never went to university. A sorrow, the cause of griefness, a cause of sadness. So, misery, great unhappiness. The miseries or the unhappiness or the sorrows of his youth. But misery is a way of an unpleasant way of life, unpleasant living conditions. Yeah, this caused misery and poverty for many people. You could call somebody a misery. Yeah, he's a miserable git. Yeah, he's unpleasant. Where if he's a sorrowful git, he's always sad and depressed, and they're clearly very, very different. Sorrow, a feeling of regret, a feeling of sadness, particularly sorrow or regret over somebody's death. Sorrow, a feeling of distress caused by disappointment, misfortune, the suffering of other people. Yeah, it makes you sad to see them. When somebody dies, you feel sorrow. An event or a circumstance that causes sorrow. Whereas misery is a feeling of physical or mental distress. A misery, a cause or a source of physical or mental distress. To make somebody's life a misery, to put somebody out of their misery, to put them down, to kill them, to end the pain of an animal, for example. So, misery versus sorrow. Let's see. Misery comes from Latin miseria, meaning wretched, and sorrowful from sor in Dutch, Zorg, or in German, meaning sorrow or sad. Misery and sorrow. I think I'm going to give them both a 6 in formality, but you could use them anywhere. So, misery and sorrow, they're not quite the same. Yeah, remember, misery can be a physical pain. Sorrow is always mental pain.